The only thing she left was the towel. Not the good one. Not the navy blue one we got as a gift. No, she left my towel. The old one, fraying at the ends, sour with age. The one I told her I needed just one more week to replace. She took everything else. Her clothes, her charger, the weird lamp from her side of the bed. She even took the tea strainer I never used. I was still dripping when I saw the suitcase marks on the carpet. The first thing I said was, "She took the damn tea strainer." Not "where is she?" Not "what happened?" Just that. Because somehow, that tiny strainer felt like the final judgment. Like she was declaring me permanently unworthy of loose-leaf beverages. I didn't yell. I didn't run out the door. I just sat on the wet floor with that towel around my waist and stared at the empty socket where the lamp used to plug in. She even unplugged that gently, like she didn't want to wake me. That's how quiet her exit was. But here's the part that keeps me up. We had dinner together the night before. Falafel wraps. We watched a baking show. She laughed at my dumb joke about meringue. Then we went to bed. She fell asleep first. Or faked it. I'll never know now. There was no fight. No, we need to talk. Just towel. I spent the next 4 hours walking through the apartment like it was an art exhibit of absence. A coffee mug that was always hers, gone. Her half-read book, gone. Her planner with the sunflowers, gone. But her toothbrush was still there. One blue toothbrush, still damp. Like she wanted me to know it wasn't an accident. Like she wanted me to brush my teeth and wonder. So I did. And somewhere between brushing and gagging on my own bitterness, I realized something. She wanted me to fall apart. She wanted me devastated, paralyzed, curled up on the couch with old photos and unwashed dishes. I think she pictured me crumbling, texting her pathetic messages at 2 a.m., begging for clarity. And I almost did. But something inside me, a small, sour thing, lit up. Not revenge, not anger, something colder. I picked up that towel and folded it. And in that exact moment, I decided something. If she wanted to vanish like a ghost, then I'd become the haunted house. The first app open in the background was her calendar. Wednesday, 3:30 p.m. R.H. at 22 Birch. No other details. Just initials and an address. Not a work meeting. Not a hair appointment. Just that. It hit me then. R.H. wasn't a friend. Not family. Not someone she mentioned in passing. I would have remembered. And if she was meeting someone privately, in the middle of the week, outside our neighborhood, without ever once mentioning it, then it wasn't innocent. I plugged the address into Maps. It wasn't a gallery or a spa or some cafe. It was a small house. A one-bedroom with peeling paint and a broken chain-link fence. Rental property. Nothing fancy. The kind of place people don't bring their marriages. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe the towel, maybe the toothbrush, maybe the sheer silence of it all, but I made a decision right then. I was going. Not to confront. Not to cause a scene. Just to see. Just to understand how far gone she really was. I needed to witness the distance between us in physical form. And maybe, deep down, I hoped I was wrong. But I wasn't. Because what happened at that address was something I never saw coming. Something worse than an affair. It wasn't just betrayal. It was orchestration. Premeditated. Cold. And in that moment, standing on the sidewalk outside that house, I realized something terrifying. She didn't just leave me. She played me. And I wasn't going to play fair anymore. I parked 3 houses down from 22 Birch. The place looked like it hadn't been touched since the early 90s. The porch sagged. The siding was sun-bleached and cracked. It didn't scream, "Secret Lover's Hideaway." It screamed, "Don't tell your landlord you live here." I sat there in my car for almost 15 minutes, just watching. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe her face in the window. Maybe someone else opening the door and confirming the worst. But the house just sat there, quiet and ugly, with peeling numbers on the mailbox and a dent in the garage door like someone had backed into it a little too fast. Then I saw it. In the front window, on the inside ledge, 2 coffee cups. One red, one white. Closed together. Steam still rising. It was a Wednesday. 3:42 p.m. She was inside. With someone. And she'd been here long enough to settle in and make coffee. I should have driven away. That's what a stable, self-respecting adult would do. But I wasn't stable. I wasn't even sure I was fully awake. I felt like I'd wandered into a version of my life where I didn't speak the language anymore. So I got out. Quietly. I walked past the neighboring yard where an old dog stared at me like it knew the ending already. And I stepped onto the porch. I didn't knock. Instead, I crouched near the window, out of sight, and listened. I didn't care if it made me pathetic. I needed to know. I needed to hear her with him, not for closure, but for calibration. I needed to know how deep the lie had gone. If her laugh was the same. If her voice cracked the way it used to when she was nervous. But what I heard wasn't laughter. It wasn't passion. It was arguing. Low voices, sharp and fast. Her voice, firm. His, more frantic. Something about a bank account. Something about, "You said next week." Then, very clearly, she said, "You told me this would be handled by now. I gave you everything, Rowan. I left him for this. For you." Everything in me froze. Not just because she'd said his name, and yes, it was the same Rowan from the calendar, but because of how she said I left him. Past tense. Like I was already a footnote. She didn't just fall for someone else. She bet on him. She expected this place, this man, this mess to be her upgrade. I peeked through the window just enough to see her face. And that's when it hit me. She didn't look like someone who had one. She looked scared. Her arms were crossed tight, her foot tapping like it was trying to outrun the rest of her. She wasn't smiling. Her hair was pulled back, the way she only did when she wanted control of a conversation. And Rowan, the watercolor windmill guy, he wasn't some whimsical romantic with soft eyes and paint on his hands. He was thin, nervous, older than I expected. He looked like a substitute teacher who drank too much herbal tea and owed money. That's when I realized something else. This wasn't just about romance. It wasn't about love. There was something transactional happening here. There was weight in that conversation I didn't understand yet. Something financial. Something desperate. She hadn't left me for passion. She jumped into something else because she had to. I stepped off the porch and walked back to the car without being seen. I didn't know what exactly I was dealing with yet. But it wasn't just betrayal. It was a scheme. A secret. One she was knee-deep in and starting to regret. And for the first time since she left, I didn't feel pathetic. I felt patient. Because now I had something they didn't. Time. And I was going to use every second of it. That night, I went home and made a cup of tea. Not because I wanted it. I hate tea. But because she always drank it when she was trying to think clearly. I wanted to sit in that headspace. To feel what she might have felt when this whole thing started spiraling. I sat at the kitchen table in silence, the steam rising into the overhead light, and pulled out my laptop. If this was going to turn into something ugly, I needed to understand the shape of it. I wasn't interested in catching her cheating. That part was already done. She'd already left. What I wanted now was leverage. Answers. And something told me I wasn't the only one she'd kept in the dark. The first thing I searched was the address, 22 Birch Lane. No red flags at first. A rental. Owned by a small property company. No names attached that rang any bells. But then I checked the local property registry. And that's where things got odd. The house hadn't been rented in over a year. It was flagged for deferred maintenance, listed as pending repair by the company's own site. In other words, it wasn't supposed to have tenants at all. Yet she was there. With him. With 2 mugs of coffee and arguments about money. So who was paying for it? I traced the listing to an old property manager's number and called, pretending to be someone interested in renting the place next month. A woman picked up, brisk, impatient, and when I asked about the availability of 22 Birch, she practically laughed. That place? Still boarded up. We had squatters last spring. Police got involved. Needs a new roof before it's legally rentable. I thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking. Not from rage, but from something worse, recognition. I knew Marilee had her shadows, but this was something else. She wasn't just shacking up with a flaky artist. She was hiding out in a property they weren't even supposed to be in. And suddenly the conversation I overheard made sense. "You said this would be handled by now. I gave you everything, Rowan. I left him for this." This wasn't romantic fallout. This was a deal gone wrong. A plan that was unraveling. And for the first time since she'd vanished from my life, I understood something I'd missed entirely. Marilee hadn't just broken my trust. She'd gambled with it. And she was losing. The next day, I went to her old art studio. She hadn't used it in months, but the landlord still had her name on the door. I told him I was her brother. He didn't even ask for ID. Just unlocked it and said to lock up when I was done. Inside, it smelled like dust and varnish. Her canvases were stacked against the wall, all unfinished. Most were just blank, primed surfaces. But on the far end, tucked behind a rolling shelf, I found a narrow canvas with something on it, a sketch of a house. Not our house. And not Birch either. Something else. I looked closer. There were notes in pencil along the border. GPS coordinates. Initials. A number string that looked like a bank transfer code. I photographed everything, and I started putting it together. She'd left me to enter some kind of financial scheme, something to do with Rowan and maybe others. She was hiding in a house they weren't supposed to be in, making plans, watching it all slip through her fingers. And I was supposed to stay behind, dazed, broken, irrelevant. But the truth was she wasn't free of me, not even close. Because now I had the only thing she thought I'd never have again. Power. And I wasn't going to waste it. I didn't rush it. That's something I've learned. When you want to see who someone really is, you don't kick down the door. You leave it cracked open. You act like you're not looking, and eventually they walk through it, thinking they're in control. So I played the part. Quiet. Low profile. No texts. No confrontation. I even deleted her number. Not out of spite, out of strategy. Because the next move I made would feel, to her, like a ghost reaching through a wall she thought she'd bricked shut. It began with her sister. Talia was always the normal one. Dental hygienist, practical, married to a man who owns a flooring supply business. She never liked me much, but she liked Marilee even less when she got dramatic. So I messaged her, nothing heavy. Just said I was doing okay, that I appreciated her kindness over the years, and that if she ever heard from Marilee, I hoped she was safe. I made myself look small. Wounded. Confused. Not a man with a plan, just a man in the fog. She replied within minutes. Talia told me she hadn't heard from Marilee in over 3 weeks, not since a strange call where Marilee asked if she knew anything about a wire transfer that hadn't landed yet. She said Marilee sounded rattled, like she was afraid to say too much over the phone. Then Talia added something I didn't expect. If she's in trouble, Denton, maybe you're the only person who can get through to her. I let that sentence sit in my head for hours. It wasn't an invitation, it was an opening. Because if her own family didn't know where she was, then she was hiding more than just shame. She was hiding risk. Risk from whoever she was tangled up with, or maybe risk she created herself. The next step was delicate. Remember that canvas I found? The one with the GPS coordinates and the bank number scribbled in pencil? I traced the coordinates. It was a storage facility. Not just any one, a remote one, way out in the industrial edge of the city, surrounded by fencing and gravel lots. No cameras. Cash-only lockers. The kind of place people used when they didn't want records. I drove out there on a Saturday afternoon and pretended to be interested in renting a unit. The kid at the counter barely looked up from his phone as he handed me a clipboard. While he was distracted, I leaned just enough to glimpse the open ledger beside him. I saw a name. R. Halverson. Locker 118. Cash paid monthly. No phone number. No ID. I didn't go near the locker that day. I didn't want to spook them. I just needed to know it existed, and that it wasn't some hallucination from my grief. It was real. She'd left breadcrumbs. And now I knew where they led. Later that night, I left a message. Not for her, for him. I created a dummy email account, with a name they'd recognize from an earlier chapter in their plan. I found it on one of the receipts tucked in her sketchbook, Marcel. A name written in Sharpie on a folded delivery slip from a custom print shop. I had no idea who Marcel was, but it was enough to seed the fear. The email was simple. 118 is hot. He knows. Clock's ticking. That was it. No threat. No accusation. Just enough confusion and paranoia to do the work for me. Because if there's one thing I know about people like Rowan, they don't handle pressure. They crack. They turn on each other. They start trying to plug holes in a boat they don't know is already sinking. And that's when I'd make my real move. Because this wasn't about getting her back. This wasn't about winning. It was about turning the tables so quietly, so precisely, that by the time she realized I was in control, it would already be too late. 3 days passed without any sign of movement, and I started to worry I'd miscalculated. Maybe they weren't watching that storage unit anymore. Maybe Rowan was smarter than I thought. Or maybe, worst of all, they didn't care if someone knew. But then, Wednesday happened. It started like a normal day. I went to work, a narrow, windowless office where I troubleshoot software for clients who think turning their monitor off is the same as losing everything. I was halfway through an email thread about printer settings when I saw him. Rowan. He was standing across the street from the building, under the awning of a closed bookstore. He wasn't doing anything. Just standing. Hands in the pockets of a corduroy jacket, baseball cap low over his face. But it was him. I knew it. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't people watching. He was watching me. I stared at him through the sliver of a window near the exit door. I didn't react. I didn't go out there. I didn't even blink. I just watched him back, calmly, deliberately. Let him wonder if I'd already expected this part. Because the moment he showed up, he confirmed it. The email landed. It landed hard. I stayed 2 hours later at the office that night, pretending to work, waiting to see if he'd come back. He didn't. But the next morning, I got a text from an unknown number. No name. No greeting. Just, "We need to talk. Somewhere neutral. Tomorrow night." I didn't respond right away. I let the message simmer, let him sweat through the silence. Finally, 8 hours later, I wrote, "Fine. There's a bar behind the train station. Edison's. You come alone." He agreed. That was the first real mistake he made. The second was showing up nervous. He walked into Edison's looking like a man with 10 unpaid parking tickets and a suitcase full of wet money. He scanned the room too quickly, sat down too fast, didn't order a drink, just stared at me like I had a detonator in my pocket. I let him speak first. I wanted to hear where he thought we stood. He asked if I'd been following them. I said nothing. He asked what I knew. Still nothing. Then he leaned in, and here's where it got strange. She didn't tell me about the storage unit. Not until last week. I looked at him, finally breaking the silence. She left her entire life behind, and you're just now hearing about the one place she's hiding things? He looked down. It wasn't part of the original deal. Deal? He'd slipped. Just like that. One word. I asked what kind of deal he meant, and his mouth snapped shut. He realized too late he'd said too much. That I wasn't just a heartbroken ex fumbling through post-divorce delusion. That I'd come prepared. So I laid a card on the table, not all of them, just one. I told him I knew about the rental house, about the fake address, about the cash drop-off. I said nothing about the coordinates or the canvas or the sketchbook code. Those were mine. Those were still my leverage. He looked pale. He asked if I was threatening him. I said no. Threats come from people who are angry. I'm not angry. I'm focused. He stood up and left without saying goodbye. I watched him walk to a rust-colored sedan that didn't belong to him, license plate taped from the inside. A burner car. Temporary. Just like their whole situation. By the time I got home that night, there were 3 missed calls from an unknown number and 1 voicemail. It was her. Her voice cracked when she said my name. She sounded nothing like the woman who left a toothbrush behind like a tombstone. She sounded cornered. Trapped. Like someone who just realized the escape route wasn't a door, it was a loop. And I was the one holding the string. I didn't listen to the voicemail right away. I don't know why, maybe I was afraid of what I'd hear. Maybe I liked holding the moment just before the truth a little longer, like some kind of masochistic cliffhanger. The kind where you already know the drop is coming, but you don't want gravity to have its way just yet. I watched the notification blink for hours while I made dinner I didn't eat, ran a load of laundry I never folded, and sat on the couch staring at the half-dead plant she left behind. Eventually, the silence got too loud, and I hit play. She said my name 3 times, each one softer than the last. Her voice cracked on the second. On the third, it sounded like she was underwater. There was no apology. That's what stuck out first. She didn't say she was sorry. Not once. What she said instead was this. I made a mistake. Not with Rowan. Not even with leaving. The mistake was thinking I could fix something without hurting you, Denton. But it's gotten worse. A lot worse. I thought it was just money, just a gap I could fill and move on. But he's involved with people who don't forget things. People who ask for more once they've seen what you can give. She paused. I heard traffic in the background. A door creaked. She whispered the next part like she was afraid someone was listening. You're not safe. I didn't want to believe it, but they know your name now. I think Rowan told them to spook you. But they don't spook. They erase. Please, whatever you found, whatever you think you understand, walk away. She hung up. No instructions. No meeting place. No sign-off. Just a ghost sending a warning to the man she already buried emotionally, and now realized might actually be in real danger. I played the message back 4 more times. Not because I needed clarity, but because I couldn't decide if I believed her. Was she trying to protect me, or protect herself? I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about her line. People who don't forget things. It didn't sound like someone trying to manipulate me. It sounded like someone remembering too late how fire works. You strike it thinking it's just heat, and forget it also spreads. The next morning, my apartment door was ajar. Just cracked. Barely. But I never leave it like that. I live alone. I check it every night, compulsively. I stood there for 2 minutes with my key halfway in the lock, frozen. Then I pushed it open. Nothing was missing. Nothing broken. Nothing obvious. But someone had moved the orange pill bottle from my bathroom counter to the kitchen table. I hadn't taken anything in days. I hadn't touched that bottle. And it was right there, dead center of the table, like a calling card. Whoever had been there didn't want to steal. They wanted me to know. The temperature of the situation changed in an instant. This wasn't about betrayal anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. This had moved into another realm entirely, one where debts and consequences were currency, and where I had unknowingly walked into a balance sheet I didn't belong to. But the thing is, when you've already lost everything, fear doesn't work the same way. I wasn't afraid. I was locked in. So I opened my laptop and began typing a message. Not to Marilee, not to Rowan, to someone else. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. A name she would never expect. A name I kept in the back of my mind in case the bottom ever truly fell out. Because if this was going to become war, I needed to stop being the quiet man with the towel and start becoming the storm they never saw coming. I hadn't spoken to my cousin Owen in almost 6 years. Not since he moved to Reno and started working in what he calls private cleanup, which sounds like janitorial work, but really means he helps companies erase the digital footprints they don't want public. He's the kind of guy you call when your name's attached to a file that shouldn't exist anymore. Not illegal, just inconvenient. Owen doesn't ask questions. He asks for a burner phone and a week of silence. I messaged him that morning. Didn't explain much. Just said I had a name, an address, and a cloud drive link I needed to disappear in the next 72 hours. I also asked if he could help confirm whether Rowan Halverson had any legal affiliations, pending cases, or financial liabilities under alternate spellings of his name. 2 days later, Owen sent me a message with 4 words. You were dead right. Turns out Rowan wasn't really Rowan. His legal name was Nicholas Halvers, and he'd been arrested in 2 states under 2 different identities. Fraud. Identity theft. Wire fraud. Charges dropped each time due to insufficient evidence, which usually means witnesses get scared or the money trail disappears too fast. He was good, but not clean. Owen also told me the property at 22 Birch had been tagged by city inspectors. Some anonymous tipster had submitted a complaint with photos, time-stamped and GPS stamped, showing signs of unauthorized residence. Code enforcement was scheduled to sweep the area the following week. It wasn't me, obviously. I would never think to do something that detailed. Hypothetically, I sat back, tea in hand, and waited. And then, it happened. Exactly 5 days after that voicemail, Rowan was picked up. Not by the police, not yet, but by men in suits. 2 of them. Black Chrysler. No markings. They weren't loud. They didn't knock. They just walked into 22 Birch and came out 15 minutes later, one on each side of him. Calm, like it was routine. Like this wasn't even the first time. Marilee wasn't with him, because she had already left. And here's where it gets complicated. She came back. To my door. No drama. No tears. Just her, standing in the hallway like a piece of luggage that had been lost in transit and finally returned to sender. She didn't ask to come in. She didn't pretend like nothing had happened. She just looked at me and said, I didn't know what he was. I swear to you. It started small. He said we'd flip one deal, then walk away. I didn't think it would get dangerous. I said nothing. I didn't want to make it easy. She went on. I know I broke everything. I don't expect forgiveness. But I need to thank you. I don't know how, but you got him out. You got me out. I looked at her for a long time. Not with anger. Not with longing. Just recognition. She wasn't the woman I married. She wasn't the woman who left. She was someone entirely new, standing in the ashes of a fantasy she helped build. And me? I wasn't the man with the towel anymore. I told her I hoped she'd be okay. That was it. Then I closed the door. Not out of hate. Out of finality. Because the truth is, I didn't need her to be sorry. I didn't need to see her punished. I didn't need some dramatic final blow. She had already lost something far more valuable than my affection. She'd lost the illusion of control. She'd watched the tower fall and realized I hadn't pushed it. I just stepped away and let gravity do the rest. In the weeks that followed, my life got quieter. I changed my locks, canceled my old number, started taking walks in the mornings again. Eventually, I donated the towel. That old, sour, threadbare towel. And one Sunday, standing in line at a bookstore cafe, I met someone. Nothing dramatic. No lightning bolt. Just a real conversation. A woman with short hair and ink on her fingers. She made fun of the book I was holding. I made fun of her tea order. We laughed. It felt human. Normal. New. So yeah, she left me. For a man who painted windmills and stole names and thought he could outrun consequence. She left thinking I'd collapse without her. But what she didn't know was this. I don't collapse. I rebuild. And this time, I started with myself. Don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content.